Another aspect that I promised in the first, what are we going to cover in this 50-minute talk, is what drives blood pressure. I can't give you the full Monty, as we say, on what all the factors are that regulate blood pressure in a person. But I can tell you that by and large, the forces that govern the blood pressure are mainly divided into four different areas. And the reason these four areas are important is that our approach to blood pressure, whether it's lifestyle modification or drug therapy, or in the next era, perhaps even device-related therapies, really attack one of these four arms when that particular device or approach or drug is used. And the four arms are what you see here. We know that sodium chloride intake influences blood pressure through volume expansion, but also because salt potentiates vasoconstrictor mechanisms. We know that the endothelium, the lining of the arterial circulation and the venous circulation, talks to the vascular smooth muscle around it. And that crosstalk through nitric oxide for dilators, but also through constrictors as well, governs regional blood flow especially. We know there are a variety of humors, compounds and peptides, small molecules that circulate. Angiotensin II is one example, but norepinephrine, vasopressin, thromboxanes, there are a host of humoral factors that circulate. And then there's the adrenergic system. The alpha receptor, the alpha-1 receptor on the vascular smooth muscle constricts. The beta-2 receptor on the vascular smooth muscle tends to dilate. And then the alpha-2 receptor tends to govern the release of norepinephrine from the sympathetic terminus of the neuron across the synapse. And so when you give something that stimulates alpha-2, like norepinephrine feeding back from what's in the synapse, it shuts down further release. And we have a whole class of drugs that work on the alpha-2 agonism. These four servos, these four areas of blood pressure control work together. And you can imagine something as important as blood pressure isn't governed by one system, because if that system got messed up, you'd be in bad shape. So there are multiple cross coverages here, multiple setups, so that all of them collude or conspire or work together, both to regulate blood pressure, but when blood pressure is high, it's often because several of these systems are out of kilter, not working correctly, that leads to the elevated blood pressure. And one of the things that you might wonder is, okay, so blood pressure is important. I saw that. The leading cause of death and disability-adjusted life years. So what is this most significant predictor of blood pressure in a population? And the answer is getting older. So they say that getting old is not for sissies, not for wimps, not for people that have a coward or fear problem. Well, here's part of the issue with getting old. This is work from the Framingham Heart Study in the US. And it shows you on the left here what happens to the systolic pressure, that's the upper set of lines, and the diastolic pressure, that's the lower set of lines, across the lifespan of individuals, no matter how tall you are, how big you are, etc. As you get older, your systolic rises relentlessly with every passing decade. But your diastolic tends to peak in your 6th decade of life, between the 50th and the 59th year, and then falls. And the reason this happens in both men and women, the reason it happens both in Black, white, and other ethnicities around the world, is that the nature of blood pressure elevation in younger age tends to be driven a little bit more by the resistance to blood flow in the circulation itself, the so-called systemic vascular resistance. But every heartbeat, as it expands the named vessels, the aorta, the brachial, the femoral, the iliac, every heartbeat, as it stretches, causes just the tiniest bit of damage to the elastin in the vessel wall. And that damage accumulates because our ability to repair elastin falls off dramatically after puberty. And consequently, we repair the damage in the vessel walls to elastin by putting just a tiny bit more collagen in there. So the ratio of elastin to collagen tends to fall with age, and collagen now becomes more predominant. Collagen is a great load-bearing protein. It keeps the vessel from exploding every time the heart beats when the elastin's gone. But it isn't a great stretchy protein, and that's why the systolic pressure rises. And because it isn't a great stretching protein, the diastolic recoil with each heartbeat tends to lapse with time. And that's the reason why the diastolic pressure falls instead of holding after each heartbeat, whether you're in in this populations that are shown here. But more importantly, even if you're normotensive, in other words, you're not at some threshold value of blood pressure between the ages of 55 and 65, just wait. In the next 15 years, as shown by this follow-on to the Framingham Heart Study, 90% of people normotensive between the ages of 55 and 65 go on to develop, as called the residual lifetime risk of hypertension in women and men, but they go on to develop high blood pressure. So age, thing we can't correct, is one of our leading risk factors. And so put that aside and think, okay, what's associated with age that I can address? And the answer, among many things, is the amount of body weight, the amount of sodium people intake, the amount of exercise they get, and a little bit less so, but nonetheless, number 4 on the list is the amount of alcohol they drink.